I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are BIMTV, Velocities in Music, filming tonight for the first time in our new studio at the House of Caesar. Tonight, for our 136th episode, we're going to review Caribou's 2010 album, Swim. Caribou. This is one dude. His name is
Daniel Snaith.
And Mr. Snaith, yeah, I think that's right.
As long as that's how you pronounce it, we don't know how to pronounce things.
Yeah. Anyways, this guy has a doctorate in math, and he I guess by the daytime he's Dr. Snaith, and by night at night he goes by the alias Caribou and is therefore a dance electronica god. At least on this album, on Swim. Because apparently his other previous work isn't quite like that.
He likes to switch it up a lot, which is really respectable.
Yeah. So he actually, Tom was telling me this is his third full length as Caribou. Before he went under the alias of Caribou, he was called Manitoba. But then some dude or some band named Manitoba, or like some organization, said that he couldn't use that name and they were going to sue him. And he was quoted as saying, that's like the Smiths trying to sue John Smith for being John Smith. Like, he's like, it just doesn't make any sense, and I would agree with him. I don't think that makes sense.
Yeah.
But anyways, to really describe this album, I would describe it as a very dense electronica dance experiment. And it's only 9 tracks, and these 9 tracks are very sprawling in nature. They climb all over the place and do all sorts of crazy things, and he really does some really cool experimentations with unique sound. And that's something that I look for. I love experimental music like that, especially when you can do it with something that's really overpopular and overplayed like electronica music is in 2010. And I think Caribou does put a fresh spin on it. However, you know, he chose, you know, for a guy who does all these different styles, he did choose right now to do, you know, kind of electronica dance style.
It's interesting because, first off, if you're watching this from our website, www.velocitiesandmusic.com, you can check out all our extra content, one of which is this awesome video that we've embedded of an interview of Dan Snaith, and he's talking about, you know, some of his influences, and actually not as much influences, but just the way he goes about writing his music, at least for this album. And he was talking about how back when he was in high school, he got into like sampling and stuff like that. And as he puts it, his process hasn't really changed. He just pulls from different influences and tries to make a different sound from that same process. So on this album, as he puts it, you get a lot of sampled real sounds and electronic sounds synthesized together. Just to kind of create this hodgepodge, but it's very beat heavy, but at the same time not necessarily booming in the low end. There's lots of cool kind of sometimes spacey, sometimes just kind of fun high end melody going on. For example, track 5, Bowls. Lots of cool kind of spoon sounds,
right? And bells.
Yes,
and that song actually, probably of all the songs next to Odessa, which we'll get to Odessa in a second, but that song Bowls, track 5, probably has the most bass than most of the other songs.
Yeah,
a lot of these songs are really mid range to high end. I mean, it's kind of an interesting take for someone who's doing an electronic dance album.
Exactly.
Now Odessa,
great song.
Man, this is the first single off the album, and it's getting a lot of hype. It's getting a lot of attention. It's track 1 on Swim, and it's pretty much the album's thesis statement.
Yeah.
And I really love this song. I can't tell you how many times I've listened to this song in the past 2 weeks. It's been a lot, to say the least. So much so that we've come up with a new invention that has carried out throughout every song on this album. Pretty much when it's on, we're doing this. Caribou Arms. Because this is the dance you do.
Start practicing.
Yep. This is new. This is big. This is the dance you do when you're listening to Caribou. Caribou Arms.
Yep.
And Odessa really will invoke the Caribou Arms. And that song is, I mean, the second you hear it, you're into it, you like it, and then that only grows with time. Now, at first, I really favored the beginning of this album. I really favored the beginning of this album. Track 3, Caliph or Caliph, however you say that, it's phenomenal. I really like that track. I like Sun, the track 2. But then, as I kept listening to this album, as I got to, you know, like, I feel kind of guilty because I've listened to this way more than any of the other 6 albums that we're reviewing tonight, and that's just because everyone I'm around wants to listen to Caribou. So take that as a disclaimer. Everyone I know likes this album. Everybody that I've talked to, they want to listen to Caribou.
It's very fun. It's very addictive. At the same time, like, I'll just go ahead and put this out there. I really like this album. I don't think it's mind-blowing, but there is just something that sparks about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of X factor about it.
Exactly.
And over time, though, I really started to like some of the back half of the album and some of the songs later on the album.
There's even less separation on the last half of the album. It flows all together even more than the front half does.
This is a very intricate and complex album, and it's one that's worth really digging into. And you won't be disappointed by that. I do think, though, that it's a little overhyped. I mean it's worth the hype, okay? But this thing is getting monstrous hype, and you know, it's probably not a Metacritic score of like 85 or whatever it has. Probably not quite that. I would go 81 or 82 Metacritic score for sure. But you know, 85 on up. I think that's what it has. It's an 85.
So it's somewhere between 80 and 85, I think.
And so if it was closer to 80, 81, 82, I'd probably be more down with that, because that's kind of what I'm feeling for this when I actually give it a score in a second. But I'll let you go ahead and talk about what you want to talk about.
Yeah, this album was a little rough for me at first, mainly, well, because it has a very, very similar sound the songs do. And you know, that's always rough territory, because that can work against you and it can work for you. At first it worked against it, now it works for it. Once I've gotten to know all the songs and I can separate them a little better, then I enjoy that it is a cohesive album listen.
And that's something that, to note on what you're saying, Odessa probably sounds the most unique out of all the rest of the songs.
Yeah, and because it starts it out with that.
And it's the single.
Exactly.
Probably the most dancey, fun song on the album, and then the album kind of loses some energy from there.
The only big complaint I have, though, is that I think that Daniel Snaith, which actually I want to comment on this, in that interview, you got to watch that interview, he just seems like the most likable guy. Just a guy that you want to root for. Like, yes, you're a successful musician, that's awesome. Because he's just this kind of, you know, maybe middle-aged guy. He's got his PhD, and he's just making some kick-ass music.
And you can tell that this guy is just beyond smart.
Yeah.
Beyond intelligent.
Yeah. So, anyways, past that, the only big complaint I have is that he gets a little bit of James Murphy LCD Sound System syndrome, where he takes an idea and runs with it a little too far. Some of the more repetitive tracks on this album, I'd say, are like track 2, Sun, track 5, Bulls, and is it Hannibal? I think track 8 is the short one. But they drag on for a little bit. It's not entirely justified because it doesn't switch up enough.
See, I think it works. I really did agree with you up until like the last few listens, and especially Sun. Sun has this sweet like breakdown section and then rebuild section. And LCD Sound System goes on. This album's only like 42 minutes.
Yeah.
LCD Sound System songs, he has 9 songs on his new album, and it goes for it like literally 9-10 minutes a song. So I mean, I don't think that you can compare it really to that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's just a little bit, and it doesn't get to me as much. But still, I just wish he was doing a little more different. It's enjoyable if I'm just kind of zoning out, but when I'm really paying attention to it, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm ready for something else to happen.
I will say it's not what Memory Tapes did with their electronica dance craze album. Like that album
was all over the place.
Yeah, and that album really did, like, they defined how you would change it up and kept it interesting. And that's probably one of the best electronica albums we've listened to. We only gave that a 79. If we were to go back and redo that, we'd probably be much higher. Now this isn't quite that caliber, I feel.
No, I don't think so either. It's very enjoyable, but it still leaves me wanting a little more. I also want to comment that if you ever listen to Blur, check out their track Far Out from their album Park Life, because at the end he goes, the sun, 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 and it reminds me of track 2, Sun, a lot. Just wanted to comment on that.
The last track, Jamelia, I think is probably the weakest song on the album, and it ends the album kind of abruptly, and it doesn't really do it justice, because this album...
not as much closure for something that's so thought-provoking.
Yeah,
almost.
I mean, this album really needed closure. The track 9 was kind of like the last episode of Lost. I mean, it just was like, you're just like, oh, this is going okay, this is pretty cool, this is a good season, and then, alright, like...
And then they stopped right at the end of the... It's like, yeah, pretty much.
And that's how I feel about that song. So... take that with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
Want to pick tracks?
Yeah. Definitely tracks 1 and 3, Odessa and however you pronounce that. And then if I'm gonna pick 3, I'm also gonna go with track 4, Found Out. I think that song's really enjoyable.
I'm gonna pick Odessa and Caliph. I'm also gonna pick track 6, Leave House, because I really like that track.
All right.
I'm glad you picked Found Out because I like that song too.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to rate it, Tom?
I think I'm gonna give this a solid 78.
Sweet. I'm gonna go even 80. I think this is an even 80 album, and I really like it. I don't think that you can really justify that upper 80 score with this. It's just not quite at that great level. It's just not quite there, but it's just so good. And I'd love to see what Caribou's gonna do next. I'm actually. This album convinced me that I'm gonna go back and listen to more Caribou.
Yeah.
So, anyways, well, that's Caribou Swim. Let us know what you think about Dan Snaith.
Yeah,
and his crazy attitude towards changing styles and doing different things, and tell us what you think about that whole name changing thing and whether he should have stuck to his guns and why or not. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.